What does independence mean? A lot of things to a lot of different Albertans. I'm Sheila Gunn Reid, and you're watching The Gun Show. This free episode of The Gun Show is brought to you by...
Episodes here for Rebel News. You know, our company is growing quickly, and we'd actually like for your company to grow too. That's why this ad space that I'm speaking through right now is actually available for you to purchase. So instead of people listening to me, they could actually be learning about your company, learning about your business. If this interests you, if this is an opportunity you'd like to capitalize on, send us an email at ads@rebelnews.com.
The values. You look at Western values in Western society, and these are values we could all relate to, but they're old world values of grit and community and perseverance.
It's a place where you can make a living with your back and your hands and a little bit of hard work. And it's a place of opportunity. And I think as Albertans, we're fiercely protective of that.
The world's energy crisis has been grabbing newspaper headlines. In a nutshell, we're running short of petroleum resources and the prices are zooming upwards.
My colleagues in the government and I have come reluctantly to believe that the price of oil in Canada must go up.
This was Alberta.
Origin of the Alberta separatist movement begins with the election of Pierre Trudeau as Prime Minister.
It was a deliberate and malicious targeting of the West, which suited Pierre Trudeau just fine, just like it suits Justin Trudeau just fine.
Sunny ways, my friends.
Blackface.
There is an actual hostile government towards Alberta.
Why did your dad give everyone in Western Canada the middle finger?
Really, in politics, you do have to make big decisions, and whenever you make big decisions, there's going to be people who agree with it and people who don't disagree with it.
Plenty of people want to leave this country.
It's not the kind of idea you'd expect to hear from someone who wants to win power and hold power. It is a radical idea.
And you would normalize the discussion. And so maybe Alberta wouldn't have to go, because maybe the rest of the country and the rest of the world would say, whoa, don't go. Will you accept these changes instead? That's what happened for Quebec.
There's no maple leafs west of the Manitoba border. Why do we have a maple leaf by unilateral decision on the Canadian flag?
Think of how the American colonists were in 1775. That's how a lot of Albertans are today.
What you just saw there is a trailer for our brand new Rebel News documentary. It's called Ungovernable, Alberta's Quest for Independence, and it examines the roots of the independence movement, the causes of Albertans' sense of disconnection with the rest of Confederation, and it examines different views on what Alberta's relationship with Canada means going forward. Because depending on the Albertan you talk to, independence means something different. It might mean a complete and total separation from Canada. It might mean joining the United States. It might mean just rethinking our relationship within Confederation, sort of in the same way Quebec does. Or it might mean Danielle Smith's Sovereignty Act. Danielle Smith, our new premier, was sworn in just on Tuesday. I'm filming this on Tuesday, so it's new news to me, although you're probably watching it on Wednesday. So, getting back to the documentary. The documentary was made by our head of documentaries, Kian Simone, and he's got a very unique take because he's not from here. He's from here now, and he moved out here for freedom, like so many people have, since Alberta was a thing. People came here for freedom, and he came here for freedom during the pandemic because despite what our politicians tried to do, our people remained, as he points out, ungovernable and free. So joining me now in an interview we recorded earlier today is my friend Kian Simone. Take a listen. This free episode of The Gun Show is brought to you by...
Well, the remains of 215 children have been found in a mass grave in Canada.
Many of you know that just over a year ago, the discovery of the remains of 215 children was found at the Kamloops Indian Residential School at the Tecumseh First Nation. But what if I were to show you that what I just said wasn't true, and that in fact, a year later, not a single body has been found?
This mass grave is a painful reminder of the genocide.
Canada's leaders aren't condemning the burning of churches. No, they're endorsing the burning of churches.
A juvenile rib bone that surfaced in the same area.
Looks like the chief.
It is.
Could be So joining me now is my friend and colleague, someone I'm very, very proud of, Kian Simone. He's our Rebel News head of documentaries. Kian, thanks for coming on the show. I'm so proud of the work that you're doing to tell the stories of everyday Albertans, the sort of people who are mocked and talked down to in the national subsidized media, but even in the local subsidized media. I want to talk to you about your newest documentary. So we'll get into that in a second, but I think you really serve as a counterbalance to what the subsidized media is doing to the normals of, well, not just Alberta, but your last two documentaries have really focused on Alberta, but I think the normals of the world when we take into account your work on the Dutch farmer protests.
Yeah. Well, it's funny, when I first started doing documentaries full-time for Rebel, I was like, I'm going to be traveling everywhere doing documentaries about everything. And then now it's strictly been Alberta. And I think that's great. It's helping me learn the place that I moved to. But yeah, that's exactly right. You look at, I think it was you who put the story about how nobody watches the CBC documentaries. And that's something that I really wanted to change when I started this adventure of, I myself don't even watch documentaries. I think they're so boring. I can't sit down for an hour and a half and watch something anymore. And I think that's just because of attention span and the way that we consume media. But I wanted to add like another spin to it, where people my age and people younger than me, and of course people older than me, who could watch it all the way through and be able to leave and say, 1, I learned something. 2, I now know the truth. And 3, I'm going to watch the next one. And I think so far with the last two, and nobody's seen the second one yet, but I think I've accomplished that people are going to start being moved by longer form projects again.
It's such a great point, because I used to like documentaries, but it felt like I quickly watched all the interesting ones, and like an entire world of documentaries. All of a sudden I was like, there's literally nothing to watch, because so many of the documentaries about Canada or produced in Canada always have a certain bend to them because they are National Film Board subsidized. So you're making government content and you're getting a grant from the government, and you only get a grant from the government if you're making something the government wants people to see. But in the end, the people really don't want to see it. Although it doesn't matter if it's a commercial success or failure, because the taxpayers paid for it all.
That's exactly right. And the best way to put it is, take your most exciting Rebel video, and I'd say 70% of people would say, oh, I want to watch more of this. This is what the documentary adventure of the Rebel News is. It's our most exciting content in long form, so you get every single aspect of it. And you're right, there's no... The government of Canada isn't behind a single penny or a single minute or a single second.
In fact, it seems as though we specifically produce things that the government hates and hates us for. And it's a really great point that, we have journalists. For example, you were embedded with the Coutts border blockade. And Sid Fizzard, he was there for over 2 weeks. I think you were there for 9 days. And you are rolling film the entire time. Now, you might only see 5 or 6 minutes of the most interesting things that happened that day in the report that came out of that day. But on any given day, you guys had hours and hours of exclusive footage, because the CBC, not only were they not going to make the trek down and just basically move to Coutts like you guys did, but nobody trusted them. So they weren't getting the inside story, and they were getting the things that they did report on completely wrong. So, for people who they've watched all of our Coutts coverage, for example, there's no possible way that they've seen all of our Coutts coverage, because we even have footage that still didn't make it into the latest documentary.
We have hours that even, I've only ever seen with my eyes. I didn't even go through it on my camera because I just went through what I know of the story. There was so much stuff there of like more humanizing things that I couldn't even include, which was my biggest regret. Trying to, keep it compact in under 4-hour documentary. But yeah, that's exactly right. And that's the best part about venturing out to these longer projects, is you get to put everything into it that otherwise you wouldn't see in a report. And that's why the Coutts documentary was the thing, because we couldn't even do reports. There was no service. So I said, I'm going to make one long report. And then I just ended up adding music, and I started cutting things out that weren't as interesting. So I was able to actually make like a theatrical, I hate that word, but a theatrical version of what the Coutts border blockade was.
And we've been using Rebel News shorthand when we're saying Coutts documentary, but the documentary itself is called Trucker Rebellion, the story of the Coutts Blockade, and that is available. That's available at truckerdocumentary.com. And even the premiere, the theatrical release of that, was a story in and of itself, because we had the truckers from the blockade show up in a limo and come in as stars of the show, and we didn't even know that was going to happen. It was excellent.
Well, the first day that I found out we are going to have it in theaters, I sneakily texted one of the truckers. I had his number from down there. And I said, hey, I don't know if this would be interesting or weird for you, but I think we're going to play this in a theater. You should come. He said, yeah, maybe I'll come. Maybe I won't. Like, it was kind of still really hot back then of if he should show his face around anything.
Sure.
And then the day of, he's like, do you have an extra ticket? And I was like, I think so. And he's like, okay, well, I'm coming with 25 guys. I only have 24 tickets. And I was like, okay. And then, they pull up in a limo.
That was crazy. It was crazy to see those guys walk in, and they walked in like heroes. And it was a stark disconnect between how we saw the politicians treating them, how we saw the mainstream media treating them, but how the normals of the world treated these guys. They knew what those truckers had done. They had ended the vaccine passports and all the medical and systemic discrimination that came along with it. They had ended that by their actions at the border, and they put themselves at great personal risk to do it. And when you saw how the normal people reacted, they knew the media had been lying to them. They knew that Jason Kenney had been lying to them about what happened at Coutts. And it was just so refreshing to see those guys treated like the heroes that they were.
I'll never forget the story when, after the movie, when we had the Q&A, before we got there, 3 of the truckers came up, just walked up on the stage and grabbed a mic, and one of them was saying how he had a 2-week-old baby when the Coutts started, and he left his 2-week-old baby for 17 days to what he said was fighting for other people's freedom.
Well, and his baby's freedom too, I guess. You see your baby, and that's when you see your kids. I'm a parent of 3, and it's quickly one of those things that makes you realize that the future matters, not just the present, because you can sort of power your way through a busy day or a terrible day, but you want to make the world a better place for your kids. Which I think is a good segue into your next documentary. People can find out the details at, and I know this URL, albertadocumentary.com. And it's really the story of Albertans wanting to decide our own future, whatever that might look like, and that we are going to have these conversations no matter who tells us to shut up. Tell us about your new documentary.
Yeah, well, it was supposed to be just about Alberta independence today. What are the big names saying? What are the smaller names saying? What are the local Albertans saying? What are the lawyers saying? What are the politicians saying about it today? And my first interview was Derek Fildebrand, the Western Standard. And he answered none of those questions. He went back 117 years.
Yeah.
And I was like, what the hell did I just get myself into? So going forward, I started taking apart Derek's interview and forming different questions of where has Alberta come from? And so in the documentary, it goes from the past 117 years, all the mishaps from joining the Confederation to the United Farmers of Alberta parties, over to the National Energy Program, then to Brian Mulroney, then to the Reform Party. And then we're getting into NDP and the floor crossing and the fall of the Progressive Conservatives into the UCP. And then we're an hour and a half into the documentary and people are like, okay, now we can talk about Alberta independence. But we need to set it up first because independence is such a broad subject that I before would have said that it meant independence from Canada as in separation. But it's totally not even close to that when you just say that independence word. And that was why I asked everybody in the documentary is, what does independence mean to you? Because like I said, before I would have said separatism, and now I say it's just about making our own decisions. And that's sure something really easy to say is making our own decisions, but it goes all the way down from being a part of the pension plan to collecting our own income tax to a provincial police force. You can go on and on and on about all these like small, minuscule things that Albertans don't have that, let's say, Quebec has, or that we can't seem to get our oil and gas pumping up again in the way that it should or used to, or and that's because of the federal government and us not being able to make our own decisions. So yeah, it goes through every aspect that you can possibly think of, some more than others that people were more able to talk to and that I could keep under. Again, it would have been a 4-hour documentary if I wasn't there every single day for a month cutting it down, because Albertans have a lot to say. And it was cool for me to be the one to help them say it in a different light or a different view. And in this case, a long form documentary because I'm from Ontario. And I moved here last year because Alberta is the land of second chances. And I think that that's really what the documentary is about, is Alberta wants a second chance.
That's a great point. And, you know, we just chose, or at least members of the United Conservative Party just chose a new leader, so a new premier who, as we're filming this, is currently being sworn in. And she, Danielle Smith, is getting her second chance also because of her floor crossing. She crossed the floor in, I think, 2014 to join the Progressive Conservatives against the will of the grassroots of the party. She was tossed out of her own party. She lost her nomination. The PCs lost the leadership or the election to the NDP. We had 4 dark years, and a lot of people attributed that to Danielle Smith's floor crossing. But this is a place of redemption. This is a place that no matter what, you can't keep us down. Send us another Trudeau. And they might knock us down, but we'll get back up again.
I want to add to that point.
Please do.
Sorry to cut you off there.
No, please.
That it wasn't just Danielle Smith that caused that NDP election. Now that I've learned, going back, it was really a lot of protest vote. And it was because the PCs were stale. The Progressive Conservatives are very stale. It was 44-year reign, and nothing was really changing. We had all of the prime ministers that were supposedly on our side, from Brian Mulroney up until Stephen Harper. And Stephen Harper did a lot of good things. Brian Mulroney didn't. But it all got reversed. So they were looking on the inside and saying, we need a breath of fresh air. So a lot of the votes that went to the NDP was kind of like a middle finger to the Conservatives who weren't helping them. And I think that just goes to the name of the documentary. Even though that people didn't really know what they were getting into voting for the NDP, they did it because they were, quote unquote, ungovernable. If you're not going to govern us, then we're going to find somebody who can. And that just plays into the whole Jason Kenney thing as well. He didn't govern us properly, so people kicked him out.
Yeah, there's a lot of people who voted for the NDP out of protest. There are also, I think, just as many people who voted for the Wild Rose out of protest of what Danielle Smith did. And it reflected in the vote count when the Wild Rose actually gained more seats with Brian Jean as a leader. After Danielle Smith was tossed out, burned the party to the ground, he sort of yanked it out of the fire, put it back together, and formed a more formidable opposition than she had, because again, you're not going to tell us what to do without asking us what we want to do, which has been the story of Alberta since we joined Confederation. And it's why all these protest parties are born here. The Reform grew here, was born here. Wild Rose was a protest party to the corruption and stagnation of the old PCs. And it should be a lesson to Danielle Smith going forward that, okay, you are going to get thrown out if you don't do the things that you say you're going to do, like what just happened to Premier Jason Kenney. But also, Albertans are willing to burn it all down rather than violate their conscience.
And Albertans are one of the only people that I know who would be able to build it back up properly.
Yeah.
That's why I don't think that they have much fear of burning it all down to the ground.
Now, what was the one, like you, I say this all the time, every time I interview, but I'm always so fascinated because you don't come from here, but you're from here now. We like having you here. You're one of us. I call you a born again Albertan. I think that's what you describe yourself as. How much did you know when you came here? Like how much, you obviously knew, everybody knows that Albertans are prickly and we don't like it here for a bunch of different reasons. But how much did you know when you came here about just how much we really don't like the deal we're getting with Confederation?
You know, if you asked me 4 years ago, it would have been, this place is full of rednecks. But if you asked me when COVID started, it was, I knew that the rednecks just wanted to be left alone. And so when COVID did start, and my local Walmart got taped up for non-essential items, I went there for laundry detergent and I couldn't buy it. That night, I called my girlfriend. I said, I'm leaving. And the next day I did leave. I had nowhere to go, nowhere to stay. And I knew that I had to get to Calgary because I could set myself up as a base there. And then I would be able to move out of the city and be left alone. And that's really, as you would sum it up and as I sum it up, that's what Albertan is. And I didn't necessarily know. I just knew that it was a concept here that people wanted to be left alone, but I didn't understand that it was like a legit political standpoint. Like, leave us the hell alone, stay off our lawn and stay out of our pockets. But it doesn't go to show, like when you say prickly, that doesn't mean your neighbor. That doesn't mean the person down the street. And that doesn't even mean someone who disagrees with you. Like, Albertans are so welcome. And I didn't think that before I came here. I really didn't think that would be the case. That this is like the place in Canada with the nicest people possible who will do anything for you if you're in trouble, who if the community has something going wrong with them, they're the first person to stand up. And I learned a lot of that actually, not just when I came here, but during Coutts Blockade. When Milk River had the neighboring protest, when they weren't allowed past the police barricade, there was a legit town there that they built of people who were cooking for each other and praying together. And it was like, it was such a weird thing to me that I knew that would never happen in Ontario. It would never happen in Quebec. And I would go to show that it might not even happen in Saskatchewan. That Alberta might just be the place that can only happen because the people here are so welcoming until you reach into their pocket for a bad reason.
It's true. We're this strange contrast, but I think it comes down to don't tell us what to do because we know what's best for ourselves. That community, having a sense of community and being a community does not necessarily require a government telling you to be a community. And looking out for each other does not require a premier scolding us and telling us to stay home because that's the best way to look out for each other. And I think that's one of the reasons why us Albertans were just so darn ungovernable during the pandemic lockdowns is because, no, we already know how to look out for each other. And we like being part of a community. So don't tell us to deconstruct our community for reasons that don't make any sense to us.
Exactly. I don't even think I have an answer to that. That was
wasn't
perfect.
A question. And you know, like when you moved here, you sort of moved before Jason Kenney really started his pandemic crackdown.
He brought me here.
Yeah, because he sort of fancied himself to be the Christian
literally
Rome.
him.
Yeah. It
was literally what he said. He said there will not be vaccine passports here. I think it was like actually the first kind of nudge was when he called out the Great Reset.
Yeah.
To the public, like it wasn't a hidden thing where he called it out. He released a statement.
It was his Christmas address.
Yeah, that exactly. And that was like, okay, I'm going there. You know, America's got Trump. I'm going to Alberta.
Yeah.
And this was 2019, or when he said it was
2020,
December of 2020, was it?
Yeah.
Yeah, 2020. America had Trump. I'm going to the Canadian Trump. And I got here and there was a little bit of lockdowns that I kind of understood at the time. Like not, I'm not saying I was pro lockdown, but like I just kind of understood the.
You had to have some for
so many
to
people
placate.
in a store.
Yeah, to placate the fear or whatever. Yeah.
But it wasn't terrible here. Just when I first got here, there was a little bit of lockdown, but it wasn't terrible. It was still livable. And Jason Kenney was still, not backing down on anything. And he's like, we're going to open. And we did open for the summer. What was it? The best summer ever or whatever? Open for summer.
Yeah. Then came the fall of our discontent.
Yeah. And then I was bragging to all my friends, bragging to my family. I was like, haha, keep those masks on, losers. And I'm in Banff just partying it up.
Yeah.
And then September 19th happened. And lockdown. No longer Trump.
You know what, though? Regardless of what our politicians wanted us to do, they do not define us. And that, I think, speaks to, it comes through in your documentary that, there are politicians who tried to tell us what to do. They tried to be the saviors of Albertans. But, in the lockdowns, our politicians may have been telling us how many people we could have in our house, but we weren't following those rules. They were telling us, don't feed your unvaccinated friends and neighbors in your restaurant in small town, middle of nowheresville, Alberta, but they sure were. They were telling our pastors to turn away congregants, but they weren't. And so even when our politicians, whom we thought were okay, showed us they weren't, it didn't matter because they are not what defines the people of this province.
And that's why it's the best place in Canada. That's why I named my documentary Ungovernable.
Now, tell us, how do people get tickets to the documentary? Because as we're filming this on Tuesday, but it'll go to air on Wednesday, and we have a showing in Calgary on Wednesday, but that showing is already sold out. So we have two more showings. They're both very different. They're in the Edmonton area, but there's something for everybody there.
Yeah, so on next week, October 19th, we're at Buffet Royale. It's exactly what it sounds like. It's a legit buffet, and it is delicious.
It's amazing.
And it's a very nice, small, intimate room with 100 other people. And we get to watch it on multiple screens. It's a great sound system, and you get to eat all you can eat, fries and chicken wings and beef ribs.
Everything.
Yeah, it's awesome. Tickets at albertadocumentary.com for that.
And Ezra's coming for that. Ezra's coming for that showing. So it's going to be great. You get to see exactly how much he eats, when he can eat, how much he wants to eat. And then we'll have a Q&A session afterwards. Sorry to interrupt. Keep going.
I'm sure he somewhat just doesn't, not that he doesn't like it, but I'm sure there's something inside of him. It's like, okay, people, stop talking to me. I want to eat now.
I know.
It's like whenever Ezra's out, everybody's like, "Hi, Ezra, you're my hero. You're the best."
I know. He's like, trying to eat a beef rib.
Their second show is at Church in the Vine, my favorite church, in Edmonton on October 30th. That's a Sunday. That is a huge room, huge screen, huge sound system. It's family friendly. You can bring your kids or your grandma. And tickets are cheaper on that one. We give you a pop-in popcorn.
Yeah, pop-in popcorn or pop-in chips. But there's popcorn, I know, because I have to pick up the 50-pound bag of popcorn and lug it in. That's my duty for that. So I think that one is very affordable, very family friendly. It's $12 a ticket, including a drink and a treat. So.
And there's a Q&A after that as well.
Yes. And they are the best church. They're just recovering from an $80,000 fine, Alberta government, for refusing to turn away their congregants and for shooing away health inspectors during church services. So they are also ungovernable in the sense that they are obedient to God above all else.
The best. I feel so terrible plugging this after that, but we also have merch for the documentary, our Ungovernable t-shirts.
Yes.
If you're watching this and you're coming, definitely pick one of those up because those are so cool.
They are. They're not just, if you have friends in other parts of the country who want to be left alone as much as me and Kian do, they're not, I mean, if you're Albertan, you'll recognize the image as distinctly Albertan. But if you're just somebody who wants to be left alone in the other parts of the country, the t-shirts are perfect. They're great. I can't wait to get one. I saw the proofs for it and I'm like, yep, save me a small. Kian, I just want to thank you so much for the work that you're doing for Rebel News and as an Albertan for telling our stories. It's difficult for us to trust outsiders, but you're definitely not an outsider anymore. We get a lot of people from other parts of the country telling us how to think and how to be and how to feel and defining who we are. But you hit the ground running as an Albertan, and we're so glad to have you.
I appreciate that, Sheila. Thank you. And thank you for having me on.
You got it. We'll talk again very soon. This free episode of The Gun Show is brought to you by
my mug. I know. It's pretty cool. So is this hoodie I got on, and you could have it on too if you check out our special website at rebelnewsstore.com. That's where you can see Freedom Focus hoodies that we have for you, beanies, cell phone cases, you name it, all while supporting our journalism, where we fight to bring you the other side of the story, as opposed to, being forced by the Trudeau government to fund leftist media out of your taxes. The truth is, without you and your generosity, there is no Rebel News. So again, if you like the reports that we bring you and that we also fight for freedoms in Canada, please consider doing some shopping, picking up some swag at rebelnewsstore.com. We appreciate your support.
Remember, if you want information on tickets and show times for the last 2 showings of Ungovernable, Alberta's Quest for Independence, it's really easy. Just go to albertadocumentary.com, and I do hope to see you there. Now, this is the portion of the show where we welcome your viewer feedback. Unlike the mainstream media, we actually care about what you think about the work that we're doing. And so that's why I give out my email address at the end of every show. If you have a question, comment, story idea, or viewer feedback that you want read on air, it's really easy. Send it to Sheila at rebelnews.com. That's my direct email. And please put gun show letters in the subject line so it's easy for me to find. Not that I'm lazy, I just get a lot of emails. So I got a ton of emails and feedbacks on my interview last week with DJ Sumanik. He is otherwise known as, or formerly known as, Yukon Strong. On Twitter, he's a firearms rights activist and hunting guide, and just an all-around generally good guy. And I've got a bunch of letters, so I'll read 2. One's long, one's short, both great. First one is from Mark Murray. Mark says, "Hey Sheila, great show regarding firearms on Wednesday. I caught your show on a podcast as my schedule as a trucker," we love truckers over here at Rebel News, "keeps me busy and sometimes unable to see the video show. As a firearms owner, I'm deeply concerned with this legislation. In my opinion, the Liberals are trying to disarm the country because an unarmed citizen is very easily controlled. Australia is a perfect example of the powers the government takes when citizens cannot defend themselves." Yeah, we've seen some gruesome images come out of Australia over the course of the pandemic. Mark says, "I like guns and I love meat." Well, Mark, I think we're kindred spirits. I've been fortunate enough to be able to try venison, moose, caribou, and even the caribou's tongue. My boss in Yellowknife in 2019 treated us to a caribou stew at the end of the ice road season. The tongue is a different taste, but I did enjoy it. I hope to get back to Yellowknife soon again and get away from Ontario, where I currently live. Doug Ford is just a Trudeau admirer, and as a province, I think things will get worse before they get better. More importantly, I'm stocking up on ammunition for my firearms as I want protection for myself and family if shit does hit the fan. Anyway, I'm rambling on, but always know you have supporters like me on your side. Cheers, Mark Murray. Well, Mark, that's very kind. I think it's good to be self-sustaining, and it's good to not rely on others for your food or your personal protection. I think we learned a lot about how the police are not always reliable from the Uvalde, Texas situation, where they waited outside until somebody else barged in and tried to save the lives of children. And we've got one more from Jeff. Jeffrin writes to me and says, "Excellent interview with DJ. The clip with Mendocino, that's Marco Mendocino, talking to constituents in his riding, and the constituents told him, your gun ban isn't going to work. We need to focus on other issues like, why are kids shooting up playgrounds? Why are they joining gangs?" But apparently Mendocino didn't take that to heart, because apparently people like me, well, we're still the problem. Anyways, the clip with Mendocino in his riding was very revealing how his constituents are aware of the real problem. I was glad to hear DJ mention that his gun ban is about civil disarmament. It is indeed. Why else would you be focusing on the most law-abiding section of the population and not the actual criminals? In fact, the criminals are getting an easier ride. The mandatory minimum sentences for gang-related gun crimes, they're decreasing, while the Liberals are simultaneously criminalizing people for continuing to own something that they lawfully obtained a while ago. It's paper criminals versus real criminals. Well, everybody, that's the show for tonight. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'll see everybody back here in the same time, in the same place next week. Thanks to everybody in Toronto and around the country for putting the show together. And remember, don't let the government tell you that you've had too much to think.